They fired me effective immediately. The words came from across the polished conference table, delivered with the casual authority of someone accustomed to ending careers before lunch. Victoria Hoffman, the newly appointed CEO of Eastern Grid Protection Systems, didn't even bother looking up from her leather portfolio when she said it. My name is Bradley Pierce. I'm 54 years old, and I've spent the last 18 years protecting America's power grid from cyber attacks. Not the glamorous kind of work that gets you featured in tech magazines or invited to innovation conferences. The unglamorous kind. The kind that keeps the lights on for 47 million people across 6 states. Victoria was mid-30s, sharp blazer. The kind of confident posture that comes from Stanford MBA programs and zero operational experience. She was flipping through spreadsheets, red pen in hand, circling line items like they were personal offenses. I sat there, hands folded on the table, watching her perform what she clearly thought was decisive leadership. Transition will be immediate, she continued, still not making eye contact. We're bringing security operations in-house, more efficient, better cost control. Behind her sat 2 people I didn't recognize. A nervous-looking woman from HR clutching a tablet and a younger man in an expensive suit who had consultant written all over him. No one from operations, no one from the original leadership team, just Victoria and her imported expertise. She finally looked up, her expression somewhere between bored and irritated, like I was wasting her valuable time by still being in the room. Before you go, she said, tapping her pen against the portfolio, hand over the security protocols, all of them, access credentials, source code, documentation. We'll need everything by end of business today. The room went quiet. The HR woman shifted uncomfortably. The consultant stopped typing on his laptop. I didn't move, just sat there, keeping my expression neutral, letting the silence stretch. Victoria's eyebrow raised slightly. Is there a problem? I smiled calmly. The kind of smile you give someone when you know something they don't. I'm afraid I cannot, I said. Her pen stopped mid-tap. Excuse me. The security protocols, I continued, my voice steady and professional. They're classified infrastructure, not yours to access. Victoria's confident posture shifted just slightly. A flicker of confusion crossed her face before the corporate mask returned. We paid for development, she said, her tone sharpening. That makes it company property. I shook my head slowly. You paid for operational protection services, not ownership. The distinction is outlined clearly in Section 12 of your Federal Compliance Agreement. What Victoria Hoffman didn't know, what her consultant and her HR team and her entire digital transformation plan had completely missed, was that the security system protecting Eastern Grid's infrastructure across 6 states wasn't software sitting on their servers. It was custom-built classified infrastructure I owned personally, licensed for their use, controlled from hardware they'd never seen. And when they terminated my contract 3 minutes ago, they just disconnected themselves from the only thing keeping their power grid from becoming a sitting duck for every cyber criminal and foreign actor on the planet. In 72 hours, that oversight would cost them everything, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and show you exactly how a cybersecurity specialist with 18 years of experience protecting critical infrastructure got fired by someone who thought network security was just an app on a dashboard. I started in the Air Force running cyber defense operations at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Back in the early 2000s, when most people thought the biggest cyber threat was getting a virus from downloading music illegally, I was part of the 8th Communications Squadron, protecting strategic bomber command networks from increasingly sophisticated state-sponsored attacks. We'd sit in windowless rooms monitoring classified systems that controlled everything from base communications to nuclear asset coordination. The work taught me that cybersecurity isn't theoretical. When someone probes your network at 3 a.m., you don't have time to consult a manual or run it up the chain of command. You respond immediately, or critical systems fail. During my 12 years in the Air Force, I deployed twice to Afghanistan, setting up secured communications networks in forward operating bases where a single breach could compromise operational security and get people killed. I learned to build redundant systems that could operate independently, even when cut off from main networks. The military taught me something civilian cybersecurity experts often miss: the difference between protecting data and protecting operations. Data breaches are expensive and embarrassing. Operational failures kill people. After I got out in 2005, I spent 6 years working for Tennessee Valley Authority, learning how power grid cybersecurity differed from military networks. TVA ran some of the most critical infrastructure in the Southeast, When their systems went down, hospitals lost backup power. Traffic systems failed. Emergency services went dark. My supervisor there, a former Navy cryptologist named Roger Kellerman, became my mentor in civilian infrastructure protection. Roger had been fighting cyber threats since before most people knew what the internet was. Bradley, he told me during my first week, military cybersecurity is about preventing the enemy from seeing what you're doing. Civilian infrastructure security is about preventing the enemy from stopping what you're doing. Different mindset entirely. Roger was right. In the military, we compartmentalized information to limit damage from breaches. In civilian infrastructure, we had to maintain continuous operations while under attack. The grid couldn't go dark just because someone was probing the network. It was Roger who first explained to me the legal complexities of infrastructure cybersecurity. Unlike military systems, which were completely government-owned, civilian infrastructure involved private companies, federal regulations, and classification levels that most corporate executives didn't understand. The government classifies these systems because they're critical to national security, he explained. But the companies operating them often don't realize what that means legally. They think they own something they're actually just licensed to operate. That distinction became crucial later in my career. After 6 years with TVA, I went independent. By then, I had both the military cybersecurity background and the civilian infrastructure experience to handle complex projects that most consultants couldn't touch. My first major independent contract was with Kentucky Utilities in 2011, building custom intrusion detection systems for their coal plant operations. The work was challenging in ways that prepared me for everything that came after. Coal plants were attractive targets for both environmental activists and foreign governments looking to disrupt American energy production. The security systems had to distinguish between legitimate operational anomalies and actual cyber attacks, while maintaining continuous power generation for hundreds of thousands of customers. Word spread quietly through industry circles. The kind of reputation that gets you calls when someone's infrastructure is under attack and conventional consultants have failed. By 2015, I had built custom cybersecurity systems for utilities across the Midwest, each one tailored to the specific threats and operational requirements of critical infrastructure. That's how I ended up working with Eastern Grid Protection Systems 6 years ago.
Robert Wilson, their VP of operations at the time, called me on a Thursday afternoon in March. His voice had the tight edge of someone staring at disaster.
Bradley, we just had our third attempted breach in 2 months, he said. State-sponsored actors probing our control systems. Homeland Security is breathing down our necks about compliance gaps. I need someone who understands how this actually works, not another consultant who learned cybersecurity from PowerPoint slides. Robert was old school, came up through the ranks, spent 15 years in control rooms before moving into management. He understood that behind every clean dashboard and automated report, there's physical infrastructure that has to be protected flawlessly. When I walked into their main facility that first day, the vulnerabilities were immediately obvious. Outdated firewall configurations last updated in 2009. Security monitoring systems that couldn't communicate with each other. Threat detection running on default patterns that any experienced hacker could bypass. We've got 5 different security platforms that don't coordinate, Robert explained, walking me through the operations center. Intrusion detection uses one system. Threat analysis uses another. Grid monitoring is basically isolated from security oversight. Every shift change, we lose 90 minutes just trying to synchronize security status across systems. The control room looked like most power grid operations centers, rows of monitors displaying electrical flow patterns, voltage readings, and system status indicators for hundreds of substations across 6 states. But the cybersecurity infrastructure was a disaster. Patches of different security software layered on top of each other, like geological strata, each installed by a different vendor who didn't understand how their piece fit into the larger protection scheme. Last month, we had Russian IP addresses conducting reconnaissance for 6 hours before our intrusion detection even logged the activity, Robert continued. By the time we identified the threat, they'd already mapped our entire network architecture. DHS investigators found vulnerability documentation in their files that was more comprehensive than our own security assessments. I spent the next 31 months building them a real security infrastructure, not some off-the-shelf package that kind of works if you bend your entire operation to fit it. Custom threat detection algorithms that learned the specific attack patterns targeting regional power grids. Intrusion prevention that actually integrated with physical control systems. Real-time monitoring that tracked every access point and adjusted security protocols dynamically based on threat intelligence. The development process required security clearances that most corporate IT departments didn't even know existed. Eastern Grid's infrastructure was classified as critical national assets, which meant the security systems protecting it fell under federal oversight. I had to work with NSA liaisons, DHS infrastructure protection specialists, and FBI cyber division analysts to ensure the system met federal security requirements. Most of the development work happened in a SIF-sensitive compartmented information facility that I built in my garage workshop. The space had to be electromagnetically shielded, access controlled, and certified by federal security inspectors before I could begin working with the classified threat intelligence data necessary to build effective defenses. Every algorithm, every detection protocol, every response mechanism was built from scratch and tested against real attack signatures provided by federal cyber warfare units. The system had to operate continuously while under attack, automatically adapting to new threats without human intervention. The hardware infrastructure was equally complex. Unlike civilian cybersecurity systems that relied on commercial networking equipment, critical infrastructure protection required custom-built hardware that couldn't be compromised by supply chain attacks or hidden backdoors in foreign manufactured components. I designed and assembled the core processing units myself, using only components sourced from verified American manufacturers with federal security clearances. Each circuit board was hand-soldered, every connection verified, every component authenticated through federal supply chain protocols. The result was a cybersecurity system that existed nowhere else in the private sector. Real-time threat analysis powered by classified intelligence feeds. Intrusion prevention that could detect and neutralize zero-day exploits before they propagated through the network. Physical security integration that could isolate compromised grid segments while maintaining power delivery to unaffected areas. The contract was crystal clear because I'd learned this lesson the hard way years ago working with smaller utilities that tried to claim ownership of systems they didn't understand. They leased operational protection services from my security infrastructure. I retained complete ownership of all source code, algorithms, classified protocols, and the physical hardware that made it all work. Robert signed without hesitation because he understood the difference between using something and owning it. For 6 years, everything ran perfectly. 0 successful breaches, not even close. During that time, the system detected and neutralized 47 serious intrusion attempts, including 12 that federal investigators later traced to foreign government cyber warfare units. The automated threat response prevented what could have been catastrophic attacks on American infrastructure. State auditors came through twice after implementation and found nothing to flag. DHS compliance inspectors gave Eastern Grid the highest security ratings in their sector. Federal cyber warfare analysts used our threat detection data to improve protections at other critical facilities. Robert would send me detailed quarterly reports, not corporate thank you notes, but substantive analysis of threat mitigation statistics and security effectiveness metrics. He understood what he was paying for and, more importantly, what he was getting. The system wasn't just protecting Eastern Grid's infrastructure, it was serving as a model for national grid cybersecurity. Monthly payments arrived on schedule for 72 months straight. The system performed exactly as designed, with 99.97% uptime and 0 undetected intrusions. Robert would call occasionally with questions about threat assessment updates or capacity expansion planning, always respectful of the security boundaries and clearance requirements we'd established. During those 6 years, I also provided consulting services to federal agencies studying critical infrastructure protection. The system's threat detection capabilities generated intelligence that helped protect power grids, water treatment facilities, and transportation networks across the country. Everything was professional, stable, and secure. Then Robert Wilson announced his retirement in January. Victoria Hoffman arrived 3 weeks later with her MBA from Stanford and her digital transformation roadmap that probably cost more than my annual contract. Her first communication wasn't a greeting or introduction. Subject line, legacy vendor cost analysis. The email was pure corporate optimization language about recurring expense structures and operational dependency reduction. My invoice hadn't changed in 6 years. Same amount, same service level, same scope of protection. But Victoria saw a line item on a budget sheet and immediately assumed there was fat to trim. I replied professionally, attaching the original contract and a summary of security performance metrics over the past 72 months. 0 breaches, 0 downtime, 0 compliance violations, perfect federal audit scores, threat neutralization statistics that exceeded industry standards by 400%. Her response came back within 90 minutes. Need to schedule comprehensive review of all external security dependencies. Please prepare full documentation for internal evaluation of operational systems. Operational systems? That phrase told me everything I needed to know about Victoria Hoffman. She was the type who thought complex cybersecurity infrastructure could be understood by reviewing slide decks and reading executive summaries. I started preparing not documentation for her evaluation, but the contingency plans I'd need when this conversation went exactly where I knew it was heading. 4 days later, the email arrived that confirmed my suspicions. Subject line: Security Architecture Documentation Request. Victoria wanted a complete copy of the security protocols for internal assessment and potential transition planning. She didn't want to review our service agreement or understand the federal classification requirements. She wanted to take my classified system and eliminate the monthly payment. I sent back a response that was technically accurate and deliberately unhelpful. Happy to provide all materials included under your current protection license. Then I walked out to my garage workshop, sat down at the master security console I built specifically for Eastern Grid's system, and started preparing Victoria Hoffman's education in the difference between access and ownership. The workshop contained $2.3 million worth of custom cybersecurity hardware, all of it built to federal specifications for protecting critical national infrastructure. Electromagnetic shielding in the walls, biometric access controls, classified communication links that connected directly to DHS threat intelligence feeds, and NSA cyber warfare databases. Victoria had no idea any of this existed. She thought cybersecurity meant software running on company servers, managed by internal IT departments using commercial tools. 3 days after my documentation response, another email landed. Subject line: Intellectual property clarification. Victoria wanted written confirmation that all operational security protocols belonged to Eastern Grid Protection Systems. She was preparing to terminate my contract and seize control of classified federal cybersecurity infrastructure like it was office equipment. I screenshot the relevant contract clause and sent it back. Bold text impossible to misinterpret. All security architecture, source code, threat algorithms, and monitoring infrastructure remains the exclusive property of Bradley Pierce. Licensed for operational protection only. No transfer, replication, or derivative development permitted without explicit federal authorization. Robert Wilson had understood that clause perfectly when he signed it 6 years ago. You don't buy a custom cybersecurity system like you're purchasing office software. You license access to classified infrastructure that took years to develop and requires constant maintenance from someone with appropriate security clearances. Victoria's response arrived 6 hours later. We will be transitioning to internal security management effective immediately. Final payment will be processed per contract terms. Thank you for your service. That was it. No discussion, no transition planning, no acknowledgement that she was about to disconnect the central nervous system of a 6-state power grid protection network. No understanding that she was eliminating the only barrier preventing foreign cyber attacks on critical American infrastructure. I sat at my desk for a long moment staring at that email. Victoria Hoffman had just made a decision that would compromise national security, violate federal cybersecurity protocols, and expose 47 million Americans to potential blackouts. She had no idea what she'd done. I walked out to my workshop and powered up the security console. Every indicator showed green. Threat monitoring synchronized across 6 states. Attack detection algorithms updating in real time with classified intelligence feeds. Grid protection protocols flowing smoothly through the network. Intrusion prevention systems operating at 100% effectiveness. The entire Eastern Grid corridor running exactly as I designed it, protected by systems that existed nowhere else in the private sector. Then I started building Victoria's transition package, professional-looking documentation with clean diagrams and impressive technical language. User interface screenshots showing dashboard layouts and status visualization panels, system architecture flowcharts that looked comprehensive and authoritative. Everything polished and official and completely useless without access to the underlying classified systems. I spent 6 hours creating exactly the kind of deliverable Victoria expected to receive. Visual materials that would make her think she'd gotten what she needed to operate independently. Interface mock-ups with animated displays showing normal security operations. Technical diagrams that looked detailed enough to convince corporate executives. All of it disconnected from the actual infrastructure that made security monitoring possible. By 5:30 p.m., I had a comprehensive transition package ready. I attached it to an email with a single line. Security interface documentation provided per contract termination. Classified infrastructure access not included per federal licensing restrictions. I hit send and watched the message disappear into Eastern Grid's corporate email system, where Victoria would soon discover the difference between owning a control panel and owning the engine that made it work. 6 days after her termination email, a calendar invite appeared. Security transition meeting Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. No agenda, no context, just a meeting title suggesting she expected this to be a simple handoff conversation. I joined the video call 3 minutes early. Professional appearance, clean button-down shirt, background showing my home office with my Air Force service medals and federal cybersecurity certifications visible on the wall. Victoria logged in 2 minutes late, settling into her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who thinks they've solved a complex problem with simple cost-cutting. She had obviously spent the week convincing herself that cybersecurity was just another vendor service that could be easily replaced. Jason Crawford from IT joined next, looking uncomfortable. I'd met him during the original system implementation, decent technical knowledge, but no understanding of classified security requirements. Then a woman who looked fresh out of business school, tablet in hand, ready to take notes on what she obviously thought would be routine vendor transition. "Bradley, thanks for joining," Victoria began, her tone suggesting this was administrative business. "We've made the decision to bring security management in-house. I appreciate all your work up to this point, but we're ready to assume direct operational control. Assume control." As if clicking through dashboards was the same thing as running classified security infrastructure that required federal clearances to access. I kept my expression neutral. "You're terminating the protection license agreement." "Correct," Victoria said, leaning back like she expected praise for her decisive leadership. "We'll need complete handover of all security protocols, system architecture documents, and back-end credentials. Standard transition process." Jason nodded along nervously. The note-taker typed something into her tablet. They had this choreographed-like routine vendor management, completely unaware they were discussing classified national security infrastructure. "You're not authorized to access the classified infrastructure," I said calmly. "Your agreement covers operational protection services. You never purchased ownership rights to federal-level security protocols." Victoria's confident smile faltered slightly. "We paid for development of this security system, Bradley. That makes it company intellectual property. This is standard business practice." "You paid for protection services from a functioning security network," I replied. "You never bought the underlying classified technology. That distinction is outlined explicitly in Section 12 of your federal compliance contract." She glanced off camera, probably pulling up the contract on another screen. I waited while she scanned through language that Robert Wilson had reviewed carefully with their legal team and federal security liaisons 6 years ago. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds while Victoria realized she'd walked into a situation she didn't understand. "Look," she said, attempting to regain control. "We understand there might be some technical nuances here, but we're prepared to handle security operations internally going forward. Just provide whatever documentation you have so we can maintain protection continuity." "I'll provide everything you're legally entitled to receive," I said, "nothing more." The silence across the video call was sharp. Jason looked uncomfortable. The note-taker stopped typing. Victoria's jaw tightened as she realized this wasn't going to be the smooth asset transfer she'd planned. "That'll be fine," she said curtly, trying to end the call quickly. "We'll expect full delivery by close of business today." I didn't respond, just sat there looking directly into the camera while she fumbled with her mouse, clearly wanting to disconnect before I could complicate her timeline further. The screen went black. I closed my laptop. Victoria Hoffman thought she understood cybersecurity because she could navigate software interfaces and review quarterly threat reports. She had zero comprehension of the classified hardware, the federal protocols, the specialized clearances, or the operational knowledge required to keep it all functioning. She was about to get an expensive education. The next morning, I drove to Harbor View Cafe like it was any other Friday. Small place on the water, good coffee, quiet corner booths where you could work without interruption. I'd been coming here for 4 years. The owner, Carol Mitchell, knew my order by heart. I opened my laptop and brought up the Master Security Console interface. Every indicator glowed green. Threat monitoring active across 93 critical infrastructure points spanning 6 states. Real-time analysis of 1,247 potential attack vectors. Grid protection algorithms cycling efficiently through 38 major substations. Everything Victoria Hoffman thought she now controlled was actually flowing through the classified hardware sitting in my garage workshop 15 minutes away. At 9:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria, having difficulty accessing Security Management Interface. Please provide admin credentials immediately. I stared at the message for about 15 seconds, then deleted it without responding. At 9:52 a.m., I toggled the master security relay switch. The map on my screen froze instantly. Every green indicator went gray. Real-time threat feeds dropped to 0. Attack detection stopped mid-cycle. The entire Eastern Grid Protection Network just stopped monitoring. The system didn't crash or throw error messages. I designed it to disconnect gracefully. No alarms, no warning indicators, no dramatic shutdown sequences. Just clean separation from all operational security control. For the first 12 minutes, nothing appeared wrong to casual observation. Dashboard displays still showed green status indicators from cached data. Security analysts looking at their screens would see normal threat patterns and grid status reports from the last successful update. But underneath, nothing was actually monitoring anything else. At 10:04 a.m., I watched through my federal monitoring access as the first probe hit Substation 7 in Virginia. A basic vulnerability scan from an IP address in Belarus that should have triggered immediate countermeasures and federal notification protocols. Instead, it ran undetected for 4 minutes before the automated logging system even registered the intrusion attempt. No real-time analysis, no adaptive response, no escalation to human oversight. At 10:18 a.m., a more sophisticated attack began testing firewall configurations at the Maryland Interconnect facility. Advanced persistent threat signatures that normally triggered immediate federal cyber warfare unit response. The threat assessment algorithms weren't running. No classified intelligence correlation, no attack pattern matching, no protective protocol activation. By 1:25 a.m., my federal security clearance gave me access to watch what Victoria's team couldn't see. 3 separate foreign IP addresses conducting coordinated reconnaissance of Eastern Grid's network architecture, all undetected by systems that should have immediately blocked their access and alerted DHS cyber threat analysts. At 10:34 a.m., the first confused email arrived. Subject line, quick question, threat detection lag. Hey Bradley, seeing some weird delays on security alerts. System showing green but manual checks aren't matching. Can you take a look when you get a chance? Thanks, Matthew Barnes. Matthew was one of their senior security supervisors, former Navy cybersecurity specialist with good instincts. He'd figure out what was happening eventually, but right now he was just seeing symptoms without understanding the cause. I didn't respond. By 10:48 a.m., the emails were arriving every few minutes, attack signatures not updating, intrusion detection showing offline status. Federal compliance monitoring completely dark. Multiple systems reporting communication errors, still polite, still assuming this was some kind of technical glitch that could be resolved with a quick phone call. At 10:53 a.m., my phone started ringing. Unknown number with Eastern Grid's area code. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call from a different extension. Then a third. The panic was beginning. By 15:30 of 4:15 a.m., the situation had deteriorated significantly. 7 active cyber intrusions across 3 states, all invisible to Eastern Grid's operational security systems. Grid monitoring showing normal status while potential attackers mapped network vulnerabilities in real time. My federal access allowed me to watch foreign cyber warfare units collecting intelligence that should have been impossible to obtain. Attack vectors being cataloged. System vulnerabilities being documented. Preliminary infiltration attempts testing defensive responses that weren't there. And somewhere in a corporate office, Victoria Hoffman was probably staring at user interface screens that still showed everything functioning normally, wondering why her security team was reporting complete system failure. At 11:22 a.m., an email arrived with red priority flags. Subject line, urgent complete security monitoring failure. Multiple undetected intrusions, federal compliance violation in progress. DHS Regional Security Office, demanding immediate explanation. Need emergency support ASAP. The corporate politeness was cracking. They were starting to understand this wasn't a minor technical issue. I closed the email without reading the rest and checked my secure federal communication channels. DHS, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, had logged the compliance violation. FBI Cyber Division was requesting immediate status reports. NSA Infrastructure Protection was conducting emergency threat assessment. Victoria's cost-cutting decision had triggered a federal cybersecurity incident. At 11:36 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed DHS Regional Security Office. I declined the call and watched it roll to voicemail. Then another call from a blocked number with federal area codes. Then a third from FBI Cyber Division. By noon, I had 53 missed calls and 29 unread voicemails. The 6-state power grid was experiencing what federal agencies would classify as a critical infrastructure security failure. Nothing was protecting anything else. I opened a new document and started typing Emergency Security Restoration Proposal. Terms, payment due via wire transfer before reactivation. Rate, 8 times standard monthly fee for immediate restoration service. Duration, 48-hour emergency window. Conditions, full acknowledgement of service terms and federal infrastructure ownership requirements. I attached the document to an email addressed to Victoria Hoffman, Eastern Grid's legal counsel, and copied DHS cybersecurity liaisons. Subject line, Emergency restoration services available per federal compliance requirements. Then I hit send and ordered another cup of coffee. The education was complete. Now came the reckoning. If you're listening to this and you've ever built something valuable, remember this. Protect what you create before you're forced to defend it. Read every contract, understand every clause, know the difference between licensing access and surrendering ownership. And when someone tries to take what's yours, don't get angry, don't get loud. Just smile calmly and say, I'm afraid I cannot. It's not yours to access. Then watch them learn the difference between confidence and control.